So actually only two of these are true. A function maps each element of its domain to exactly one element of its range. And a function also can be seen as a relation between a set of inputs and a set of outputs. However, none of the other three choices are true. Let's look at the first one. If we had checked this one off, we would be arguing that a function maps each element of the domain to at least one element of the range. Now think back to that soda machine example. The soda machine operated like a function because for any amount of money you put in, there's only one option for the amount of soda that you could get out. Functions work like beautiful machines in the same way. They're deterministic. A single input can only lead to one single output. So the second one must be right instead of the first one. Now we know that this last choice isn't true because there are some equations with two variables that aren't functions. Now we haven't delved super deep into this, but you already know that there has to be a special relationship between those two variables. Namely, this one, that the independent variable can only map to one value of the dependent variable. And not all equations with two variables do that. For example, we might have x equals y squared, which is a horizontal parabola. Or we might have x squared plus y squared equals 4, which gives us a circle. Neither of these pass the vertical line test, which we talked about before, so they're not functions. And they don't pass the vertical line test because they don't meet this criterion. And finally, if we said that functions must have a defined value for any real numbers input, then we would be saying that the domain of every single function has to be all the real numbers. And that's just not the case. We've talked about two different major types of domain restrictions that prevent certain real numbers from being within the domains of certain functions. We'll talk about even more of these cases later on. You just have to wait a couple of weeks for some really, really exciting stuff. I know the past couple of lessons have required a pretty major paradigm shift in terms of the way that we think about the relationship of variables to one another and what equations really are. But I hope that you found our work with functions interesting, and I think that it'll prove more and more helpful as we continue to use the function paradigm in our problem solving, especially in our setting up of equations. Great job.